Now it's time to look at the context of old age. And this one is very intriguing to me because a lot of what a person does throughout their life affects their final appearance. In other words, narrative becomes very important as anatomy knowledge. Questions like, did this person smoke? Did they spend a lot of time in the sun? Did they experience a lot of anger or pain? Did they laugh a lot? All of these factors are outside anatomy, but still play a significant role in how a person's face ages. It's not just poetic to suggest that a person's life story is written on their face, it's scientific to a degree. And this is a compelling idea, one that I want you to remember because we will tap into it further later. But for now, let's focus on transforming our younger adult head into an elderly version. Here I've turned off all of our shape keys, so we're looking at the default younger masculine head around the age of 20 to 30. And we're going to transform him into the 70 to 80 year range. However, you'll remember that we use the decimate modifier to optimize our mesh down to a level of about 100,000 polygons. And that has worked fine for all of our context morphs up until this point, but with elderly faces, wrinkles play a prominent role, and this is not enough geometry to achieve those wrinkle details. And so I need to increase the polygon count of our model, which is simple enough to do with a subdivision surface modifier. And it doesn't matter that it's triangulated, messy geometry, it's going to be fine for our purposes. However, this is going to take between 15 and 20 seconds to apply, at least on my machine, and it's a fairly high-end machine. So we're going to run into some laggy issues with this setup that I want to remedy before it becomes a frustration. Of course, I'm jumping forward with the magic of video editing, but if we switch over to our shape keys and start turning things on, you'll see that the system is pretty laggy. You know, that was like 5 to 6 seconds just to turn on a shape key. Also, it's not good enough to have the extra geometry in a modifier. Remember, that's only modifying the lower res base that we've been working on, so I actually need to apply this modifier. However, we'll get an error that we cannot apply a modifier with shape keys. And for the sake of this video and being efficient, I'm going to remove all our other shape keys. And if you're thinking, oh no, what a shame, you know, we won't be able to change between all of those at once, I will show you at the end of the video how you can maintain all of these shapes with the higher res version. But for now, I just think it's a distraction. So I'm going to one by one remove these shape keys till I'm left with nothing. And you can see that this is taking between 4 and 5 seconds to remove each one. That's the kind of lag that can be frustrating in a workflow. So I want to get rid of this and optimize it. And now with those gone, I can apply our subdivision. Keep in mind, it's only one level, the viewport being at 1. We don't need any more than that for this particular demonstration. But now our face's base mesh is up to 300,000 polygons. And so we can add a new shape key and call it elderly. Set that value up to 1. And we're ready to begin sculpting. However, you might have noticed that I have a new reference image opened. If we maximize that, as usual, I like to have a reference as a measure of guidance throughout the process. I'm a big believer in this in general. However, if we lean on the reference too much, we're not really learning why things are happening. So I want to offer 4 principles that help me understand aging in the face. Number 1 is fat pads. This is where understanding fat pads and even memorizing them pays off. Because as we age, our skin gets thinner and loses elasticity. When we're young, our more elastic skin keeps our fat and muscles pulled tight against our skull. But when skin loses that characteristic, our muscles, fat, and skin gradually start to sag. And fat pads especially become noticeable throughout this process. Number 2 is commonly referred to as turkey neck. This unflattering term refers to the extreme sagging that takes place in the skin and muscles of the neck. Over time, the platysma muscle loosens, causing the skin to hang in a distinct pattern. Number 3 is a simple one, enlarged nose and ears. Primary human growth ends in the early 20s. However, our noses and ears continue enlarging throughout our lives. Why, you might ask? Well, it has something to do with cartilage enlarging as it decays. All that really matters as artists is that we need to enlarge noses and ears to achieve an old age appearance. Number 4, again, is narrative. This is especially important when it comes to wrinkles, which are determined by situations, habits, personality. Things like if a person squinted a lot over their lifetime, they get crow's feet. If a person laughed and smiled a lot, they get cheek wrinkles. If a person furrowed their brow a lot, if a person smoked or primarily drank with a straw, if a person spent a lot of time in the sun, these kinds of things have a very real effect on wrinkle formation and concentration. So with those principles in mind and our reference sheet at the ready, we can begin sculpting. I'll make sure I'm in sculpt mode, which I am, and I will switch to my inflate brush and focus on the nasolabial fat, because commonly with older faces, this fat pad is much more distinguished. It even appears to enlarge. And so I'm going to use my inflate brush, and wow, that is really laggy. Perhaps it's worse because I'm recording, but that's not really workable. And I believe the problem is because I'm making the changes in a shape key. And so to solve this, I'm going to, in object mode, Shift D, move this head duplicate to the left and remove the elderly shape key. And on the original head, I will remove the basis shape key first, and then the elderly shape key, which actually applies that elderly shape key. It appears to have been removed, but that's a normal issue. If you tab into edit mode and then right back out, you'll see that the inflation is still there. And so I won't be able to sculpt this transformation as a shape key. Rather, I'll just have to do it on the actual mesh. But since these share object data, we'll be able to add it as a shape key after the fact. But now if I jump into sculpt mode, let's hide this other head. The sculpting should be much more improved. Yeah, this is real time again. So anyway, I was saying that the nasolabial fat appears to grow, even though I don't think that's technically what's happening when people age. Your fat actually diminishes in volume, but it does collect in certain spots or kind of clump together. And this is one of those spots. As you can see in our reference, very deep laugh lines. So with my crease brush, going back and forth between plumping up that fat pad and cutting in the crease more. Also, we're trying to make them sag. That's a common theme. So I'm going to pull it down as well. Kind of give it this S curve. And then typically they also kind of droop closer to the corner of the mouth. Kind of swing down. And then the marionette line also tends to generate a deep crease as well. And then this fat pad continues all the way down into the jawline where the turkey neck comes into play. And the way that I like to approach this is with the clay strips brush. All right, so I'm going to start on the outside of the Adam's apple and start to bulk up a ridge and then connect it all the way down into the sternal head of the sternocleidomastoid. Okay, we're going to bulk this up significantly. We're going to lose all of the Adam's apple detail. And once we bulk this up into a significant ridge, I will simply smooth it out on both sides. All right, that's going to leave a ridge in the center. Let's find a good reference for a turkey neck. It's very common to see two ridges on the outside and then one in the middle of this kind of hanging skin. So that's what I'm after right now. And it will sort of connect with these sagging fat pads in the face. All right, so we've got that started, at least the outside ridges. But I'm going to use my inflate brush and make that a little bit more distinct. And some people have more prominent turkey necks than others. This makes me think of my mom, who ever since I was a kid always did these funny neck exercises where she would like bob her head back and like tighten her neck. But she doesn't have a turkey neck, so I'm pretty sure most people don't go through that regimen. But there are varying degrees. Some necks hang really low and some are a little more slight. Let's see, I'm going to grab my clay strips again and also make a third ridge in the center. Smooth that out. There we go, that's a good start. And this kind of geometry actually works to our favor and kind of creates a believable wrinkle. So that's a happy little accident. Also, the sternocleidomastoid definition is far less. We don't see that nearly as prominent, but the wrinkles and sagging skin is going to take over. The other ridge that I like to make is connecting kind of the back of the jaw along the angle of the sternocleidomastoid. So something like this. Again, same process, building it up first and then smoothing it down. Okay. This takes a big leap forward into old age. And again, I want to kind of connect the sagging fat pads. Let's see, I can't remember what this one is called. Let's switch over to my anatomical head. When I'm talking about fat pads, I mean everything on the fat pad layer. So all these yellow pads here It would even be wise to memorize them. If not their names, at least their locations. Because if you made this an exercise of simply plumping and sagging all of these shapes in the face, it's going to lend itself to an older look. So the inferior jowl and the submandibular jowl are starting to sag down into the turkey neck. But like the middle cheek here, the medial cheek, just plumping them up a little bit, as well as sagging them, can help a lot with that old age appearance. And so let's do that a little bit. I'm going to grab my inflate brush. And again, my research says that fat volume in faces are actually decreasing. So if you don't want to plump out the fat pad shapes, we could use the crease brush and kind of lightly cut in the lines between the fat pads. Okay, so that's the inferior jowl, then the middle cheek up here, medial cheek, cutting those shapes in and also always remembering to make them sag. Okay, you can see that that stroke actually made changes to the back of the neck. And I think the reason for that is our fall off is still unprojected from a video or two ago. So let's switch back to sphere, and I think that should take care of it. Yeah. All right, so it's also a little bit faster, I believe. There we go. It's looking pretty good. Definitely an older cheek and jawline. Let's switch to a different head. Let's try this guy. And it is common to cut a wrinkle underneath the chin, where the mental fat will also start to sag. Now, before I get too high in the face, I don't want to leave the neck kind of unfinished where it was, but at this point, we can start to introduce some wrinkles. So with my crease brush, I'm going to cut a wrinkle in at the bottom, and these patterns kind of fan out from the base of the front of the neck backward. I suppose this comes from, a lifetime of head down, head back kind of motions, which often creates very distinct wrinkles in the back of the neck. And sometimes these are extremely deep, but they can connect all the way to the front. So with them roughly cut in, let's also pinch and inflate in between. Kind of my standard wrinkle creation flow. Let's also find a reference of this. You can see these wrinkles starting to appear in this guy's neck. And then continuing into the jawline, some more horizontal wrinkles. Now note, I'm not going super detailed with the wrinkles. I'm just primarily implying them, because to sculpt the wrinkles exactly how we see in the reference crosses into the next echelon of detail sculpting. So I'm not trying to do that, but just give you the impression that they're there. And then towards the back of the jaw, you usually see pretty distinct wrinkles kind of cut down from the tragus of the ear, also where the lobe connects, kind of downward. Definitely giving it a sagging kind of look, almost like draped fabric. There we go. It's feeling significantly older. That's a pretty good spot for the neck. I think the jugular notch is a little bit too deep. That definition tends to go away. Let's find a better example of this. Like in this lady, the jugular notch completely disappears. There's a little bit left over for this lady who doesn't have that much of a turkey neck. But I'll fill in a little bit of that jugular notch with the fill brush. And then back upwards, let's approach the mouth. So some distinct things happen in the lips, and primarily there is a thinning of the lips. So I'm going to grab my pinch brush and just pinch them thinner. Maybe pull down the corner of the mouth, again, going along with the sagging theme. And then also the vermilion border doesn't really protrude outward like this anymore. It actually kind of goes in. Let's go back to that face up here. You can see how it becomes more of an indentation than a ridge. So with my crease brush, I'm just going to trace that holding control. There we go. That's already feeling much older. And maybe smooth them out. The peaks of the vermilion border into the philtrum are not really that prominent anymore. Also, the philtrum itself sort of fills in. So let's either use the fill brush or the inflate brush. Smooth out those ridges. And then we can ask ourselves a narrative question. Was this person a smoker or did they use a lot of straws, right? That motion of puckering the lips, maybe they kiss a lot. But whatever would cause that puckering motion over a lifetime is going to create these kinds of wrinkles. And so if we stick with our crease brush and lightly hold control and draw these vertical lines downward into the lips. I don't want to make these too prominent. I want to keep them fairly light. And then go back over them with the pinch brush. Maybe make one of them a little bit deeper. I don't know if I like that. Some people do have extremely deep wrinkles like this. I think I have a picture. Well, this woman seems to have these very deep indentations. Maybe that's the one I was thinking of. This woman too has some pretty strong ones. But in general, we can apply that and add a little bit of narrative to this person. Same thing on the bottom. And still, I feel like I can pinch the bottom lip a little bit thinner. There we go. And continuing the move upward, we're into the nose area, which is a fairly simple process of enlarging the nose. I'm going to pull it out wider. I'm going to pull it down a little bit with weight. And same thing on the front. We're going to give it a more bulbous end. And they often do end up drooping downward. And maybe that's a little bit too plump on the end. I think that looks pretty good. Let's take a look at our reference, see if there's a good nose example. These two guys are great, very enlarged and dipping down nose. All right, so let's bring down the columella as well. And get that nice strong crease at the base. And in a way, it kind of becomes almost like a caricature of a young nose. So like if you had creases from the alar cartilage in the nose, that would become a little more distinct. And so kind of exaggerating the features that are already there, certainly giving it a deeper alar crease. All right, so deepening it first and then inflating it. It's definitely going to help it feel older. And then while I'm thinking of simple enlargement, we can go over to the ears and definitely enlarge the lobes, pull it all down a bit, inflate it. And you can, once again, kind of exaggerate the features that are already there, deepen the existing creases, plump out the space in between creases. Maybe spread out the top as well. Just kind of fan it out a little bit. There we go. Enlarged nose, enlarged ears. Check that one off the list. And then moving into the ocular region, I'm going to inflate the inferior orbital fat. Okay, so this is what's going to create the bags under the eyes, which is a common feature when it comes to old age. Something that people often want to avoid if they can, but also just the sign of someone getting older. All right, so if we plump that out, maybe plump the lower eyelid out as well. And in the same kind of idea where we exaggerate the existing features just slightly, so like deepen creases, inflate the space around. Also, the superior orbital fat can increase in size. So I'm going to repeat this technique from earlier in the course. Shift A to expand a mask by topology and pull it out, because you can see that it's stopping before we get to the upper eyelid, thanks to the way we sculpted that geometry. And so with that mask, I can plump and sag the superior orbital fat. Right, and that's going to give it more of an old person look. I think I've done that enough to clear the mask, Alt-M, and continue that as well on the outside. Maybe use the clay strips brush to plump this out. The reason I like this brush is it leaves a hard edge, which can segue very easily into a wrinkle. All right, so I'm going to start the crow's feet wrinkles this way. All right, back to the crease brush. So we've got one crow's feet wrinkle starting the process. Let's just take a look at some reference like this. And I guess switch over to the other side if we want it to be a little more comparable. All right, we're going to connect into the inferior orbital fat. Kind of bring it full circle. And then start cutting in the extra wrinkles to establish the crow's feet. All right, so if I haven't explained it yet, my wrinkle process is to start with a crease, as you might guess, but then I like to pinch and then inflate. All right, that sequence is my wrinkle creation, and it works very reliably. The inflate is so that the surfaces will even intersect with each other and create a very, very tight crease. Some of the worst creases that I see from new sculptors is simply using the crease brush and leaving it like that, which is simply not that believable. I guess depending on the situation, but when we're getting to old people, these are not light wrinkles. These are definitive wrinkles. And so we can continue out of the crow's feet into the lower eye, and wrinkles kind of emanate out. I'll do it from this side. From the indentations between fat pads and kind of emanate outward. Okay. Down into the cheek, and then across the lower eyelid and inferior orbital fat. Let's go back across. These are heavily implied, remember. I don't have enough geometry to achieve this kind of detail. That comes in the final detailing phase. But it's enough to imply those wrinkles. And that's all we really need to establish that old appearance. And if we keep that in mind, you know, there is some room to exaggerate wrinkles in the laugh line and out of the marionette line as well. Some people have these really, really distinct wrinkles that are a lot of fun to sculpt. Whereas you don't get nearly this much wrinkle play when it comes to younger faces. As a sculptor, this old age tends to be more fun to create, in my opinion. Yeah, I need to pinch this a little tighter. This is exactly the example I just used where I didn't finish the sequence. I just went crease brush and then walked away, and it was not nearly enough. So with something deep like this, we need to cut the crease, pinch it, and then inflate. And when you see that artifact happen, that's because the surfaces are intersecting, and that's okay. Just a light smooth brush to get rid of that. And now it's a much, much tighter crease. There we go. It's coming along pretty nicely. He's definitely appearing older. The only thing that's really left, I suppose, is the forehead. And so depending on the person, you know, foreheads can be smoother or more wrinkly. I think it comes down to how much people furrow their brow. And as far as narrative is concerned, you know, that could be maybe someone prone to anger or someone who raises their eyebrows a lot. You know, people are more expressive than others. And doing these kind of behaviors over a lifetime, this guy kind of looks sad, like he's seen a lot of pain or frustration in his lifetime. But that's the kind of narrative element that we can employ into our sculpture. So without any of that, it looks unnaturally smooth and non-emotive for such a long life. So let's increase the wrinkles. And well, frankly, we have to add them up top. All right, so we're talking the horizontal ridges, valleys rather. So we'll cut 3 in the forehead, inflate in between. Also inflate the brow then we'll start to tighten and inflate so that they become more distinct. And then also there are vertical wrinkles that happen. If you leave them just horizontal, you miss out on some important shapes. So I'm going to cut kind of diagonally. And that's going to create this wonderful cross pattern that I also need to pinch. There we go. Compare that to some reference. I think I like the depth of this guy's brow. Mine's a little too far apart and not defined quite as much. And then let's also cut it horizontally. I'm going to turn off symmetry. Let's cut some wrinkles across the bridge of the nose. There we go. This guy doesn't have it, but others do develop those kind of wrinkles. This guy, for example, has evidence of them. And also seeing the level of crow's feet here. You know, maybe this guy worked in the sun his whole life. And so that perpetual squinting generates these really fine wrinkles. Another example is this guy in the hat who actually has more of a younger face. You know, we don't see as definitive deep wrinkles in the forehead or in the front of the face, but in the crow's feet, they are significant wrinkles. So this seems to suggest that he's squinted a lot in his life, maybe due to being out in the sun, and his crow's feet are more pronounced than any other wrinkle. So maybe he's actually like 60 years old, but he has the crow's feet of a 70-year-old. But certainly doesn't appear to be a smoker. There's no wrinkles down there. Anyway, wrinkles, you know, can tell a story. That's kind of what I'm hitting at. I think you probably get the idea by now. Let's add one more crease up to the top. One more wrinkle. There we go. And the wrinkles is what can keep you doing this for a very long time. Like, you can always reason yourself into adding more and more wrinkles, especially when you get to the detailing phase. But I'm trying to control that urge because, you know, we're just trying to accomplish the general appearance of aging. And I think by this point we have accomplished that. Let's go ahead and connect this back up to our younger default head. So I need to reveal that head, select our old head first, shift select our young head, and we can click the down arrow in the shape key section, join as shapes. And now when I increase that new shape key, we get the transformation into old age. So let's get rid of the original head, move this one back to the center, Alt-G. And then in the mirror modifier of our eyes, select that new head. There we go. So now we're set up for our transformation to happen. And let's set it to about 0.5. And to me, that kind of looks mid-50s into the 60s age. If we go to 0.3, maybe this is 40, but all the way up at 1, you know, 80 years old kind of range. All right, so I hope that you understand the principles of aging the face and how to apply it to your own sculpture. That's going to be all for this lesson. Oh, I do need to show you quickly how to up-res all of your other shape keys in case you want to keep them all collected in one shape key library like we had up until this lesson. So stick around for that if you want to see it. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next lesson. So we're back to the version of this file that we started the video with, where we still had all of our shape keys intact from previous lessons. And what I wanted to show you is how we can propagate that subdivision through each of our shape keys so that we can then add our elderly shape key to the collection. And the way we'll do this is first by duplicating our head, one separate object for every shape key. Okay, so Shift D, move over in X. That's for the woman shape key, and then 3 more left. So Shift R 3 times. And then for every shape key, I will rename the object to the corresponding shape key and enable that shape key. So I'm going to enable weight and call it weight. Go to the next one, enable lean, call it lean. Same for the child and woman. Then I need to delete all other shape keys from each object. And this part is pretty tedious and annoying. While there is a delete all shape key option, it tends to snap back to the default head. And I can't figure out how to delete all of them while leaving the only active shape key on. So we're left doing it one by one. And then I just have to do the same for the default head. Remove all shape keys except, well, including the basis. Make sure that's deleted last. Now we just need to apply one level of subdivision for all of our head objects. And this is where I'm expecting significant lag. So with all of them selected, I'm going to hold Control and hit 1 above the letter keys. And that will add 1 subdivision level, but the countdown begins. I'm expecting at least 30 seconds, but that's been historically for one object. We'll see how it does with 5 selected. Okay, so that was worse than I thought it would be. It was like 5 minutes of waiting. It sucked up all of my machine's 32 gigabytes of RAM. My recording application stopped. So fair warning, this is a really heavy process, and I'm not sure why, because I swear I've done worse things with past versions of Blender, heavier poly counts. But I mean, we are at 3.2 million triangles, which is definitely a lot. I swear I've done more. Anyway, if you want to do this, beware that it will be a burden on your system. But now that we've got the subdivision surface modifier, I need to apply all of that. So I'm expecting a similar level of machine slowdown, but in the object menu, with all of our heads selected, go to Convert Mesh. And I will see you on the other side. Okay, so that actually wasn't bad. That was only like 20 seconds of waiting. And essentially what we've done is just baked the shape key into each object and up-resed it 1 subdivision level. And since we did that to all of our heads, we can simply add these shape key heads back into the original as a subdivided version of those shape keys. So with the original as the active object, let's go down to shape keys, choose the down arrow and join as shapes. Okay, this takes the object name, which is why we renamed every object. And so now we're right back to having all of our shape keys up-resed in our original head. I can delete the others. And then I will save this scene, then open our elderly sculpted version. Select that head, hit Control C to copy it, jump back over to that previous head, Control V to paste it. And same process, I can add this as a shape key. Join as shape keys. There we go. The object was named wrong, so we'll call this elderly. And now we've got all of our shape keys back in one library. That's not necessary to do, but since you spend all this time sculpting these various contexts, it is kind of nice to morph in between them. But maybe now you can tell why that convoluted process I saved for later and didn't put it at the beginning of the video. But anyway, that's all for the optional step. I'll see you in the next lesson.